Well, I just want to say welcome again to North Point, and thank you for tuning in with us if you're on Facebook or YouTube, whatever it might be. My name is Jeremy, and I have the privilege to be the content director here at North Point. And if you're wondering, what does that mean? It's kind of a new thing that we're trying out. And what it means essentially is I get to be responsible for what we do here on Sunday mornings, but also try to figure out new ways to make church and life and God something that you can engage with and grow with throughout the week, because those are topics that, if we're honest, they're just bigger than 1 day, 1 hour a week. And I love what I get to do, and I'm excited to be here for part 3 of Nothing Else. And the reason is because we started off this series talking about goals and New Year's resolutions. Now, I'm somebody that I absolutely love to talk about goals and New Year's resolutions. Does anybody else in here agree with me? One person, 2 people, like 2.5 maybe. I saw one person kind of. That's okay. Well, we're going to have a great conversation today, just the 3 of us. It's going to be fantastic. But I love talking about goals and New Year's resolutions. One of my favorite quotes is that we fail 100% of the goals that we never set. And so I just get a little bit ahead of myself sometimes, and I like talking about goals. And one of the things that my wife, Ashley, and I do every year is between Christmas and New Year's, being in the church world, there's a little bit of downtime between those 2 holidays, and we look at what we could celebrate the previous year and talk about what we want to see happen in the following year. Now, one of the things I've realized, and you know this as well, is that opposites attract, and you don't always marry somebody who thinks just like you. And so it's taken some time for me to realize that perhaps goals are more exciting to me than they are for her. And perhaps you can, apparently most of you in here can relate with her. But one of the things I've had to do, we've been married for almost 5 years now, is I've had to discover what it means to prime her for these types of conversations. And so I give her a couple days heads up, hey, we're going to talk about goals. Not only that, but when it's time to talk about the goal, I make sure that the temperature in the room is really nice, make sure she's comfortable, make sure she's fed, good Lord, make sure she's fed before we talk about goals. I have to do that. 8 hours of sleep is really helpful for her. Make sure I do chores around the house, all of this stuff. This is this is how I have to approach a goals conversation. And it goes pretty well, but this year was a little bit different. Something unexpected happened because we were doing a bunch of chores and projects around the house. This year between Christmas and New Year's, I got a tool belt, which if you don't have a tool belt, and you got to get a tool belt, it's the best $10 I've ever spent. I got all this masculine power when I clicked it on, and I was doing all the honeydew things, honeydew list items in the house. And so I was getting all these brownie points, and then I was just up on a ladder one day. And, Ashley's in the living room, and I just turned to her, and I said, hey, do you think we can talk about goals tonight? And what she said to me, I was so surprised about, I almost fell off the ladder. Because the way she responded to me was, absolutely, just very casually. She said, absolutely. In fact, I've already written a few down, and I'm excited to share them with you. And my heart, oh my gosh, my soul, I fell in love with her all over again in that moment. It was absolutely incredible. She spoke so deeply into who I was as a man. I was so excited. We had such a good conversation. We realized there were actually a lot of things to celebrate in 2020, even though it was such a crazy year. And we talked about what we were looking forward to in 2021. Now, the reason I share that with you is because, like I said a second ago, I have a tendency to get a little bit ahead of myself when it comes to these types of things. And I have a tendency when I jump into a new year to talk about, the 70 things that I want to do differently in the year, and I lose sight of kind of the meaning or the why behind the goals and the New Year's resolutions in the first place. Which is why, for me personally, when I say I'm excited to be here for this series, I really mean it. This series has been so, so helpful for me. And what we've been saying, and Shane said this a second ago, but I just want to reiterate it, what we've been saying throughout this series, the question we've been looking at is if we could focus on nothing else in 2021, what would it be? What would be that one thing? And now you're in church, and when you're in church, or most people know this, is that 99% of the time the answer is Jesus, right? Is Jesus. And the thing that we could focus on, our attention in 2021 would be the person of Jesus. Now, here's why that's true, though, is because we all desire so many different things in our life. We want happiness and joy and contentment. We want peace. We want love, all of these kind of things. And I really believe that Jesus is the embodiment of all of those things. And so if we could focus our attention more on him this year, it would perhaps change our life in a drastic way. And our hope and our prayer throughout this series has simply been that Jesus would reveal himself to you in a way that he never has before, or perhaps through that process that he would become more irresistible to you and your life and your faith as a result. You see, but when we look at the person of Jesus, there are things that get in the way. is one specific thing that I want to talk about today that I think tends to fog the lens in which we view the person of Jesus. I think it fogs this lens more than anything else. In fact, I think this thing creates a lot of confusion around Jesus. So it creates a lot of confusion around Christianity, what it means to be a Christian, what it means to become a Christian. And this thing are the rules surrounding Christianity. The laws, the commandments, the thou shalt and thou shalt nots. And I'm not saying the rules are inherently bad, but what I am saying is that when we view them incorrectly, we tend to fog the lens in which we view the person of Jesus. You know, perhaps you're tuning in today and at some point in your life, somebody threw a rule on you for something that you didn't believe, and as a result, you kind of took a step back and said, you know what, I don't really want to be a part of that whole Christianity thing because that just doesn't look very fun. Or perhaps you had an experience with a Christian and you were on the other side of the Christian and you realize they have this vein popping out of their head all the time. And it's just because you realize they want to sin so bad, but they just can't. And so they're mad at you because you don't have to follow the rules in which they put on themselves. And so you're like, man, this is really weird. And then they impose their rules on you, but you're like, I don't believe those things. Maybe that's why, you've kind of stayed back from Christianity in your life, or you've seen it in others. Or perhaps for you, you have taken that step and you have placed your faith and trust in Jesus. But there were all these rules before, and apparently these rules are here now, and sometimes you just struggle to kind of reconcile how these things fit together. When Ashley and I moved into our first house, there was something that we didn't realize until we had already moved in. We're moving in together, and we were married. We weren't moving in. We're married, and we're moving into our first house, and we're unpacking everything, and our community group was helping us unpack. And if you're not in a group, you got to get in a group because it's like a free moving company. It's fantastic. And I'm just kidding. There are other benefits to groups, but that is one of the benefits. Thank you to those of you who have helped us move before. But we're unpacking, and the community group, and then one lady in our kitchen, she calls out to us. Ashley and I are unpacking things in the living room, and she says, hey, where do you want us to put the silverware? We're like, well, put it in the silverware drawer, of course. And she responds like super awkwardly, like she doesn't know how to break the news to us. You don't have a silverware drawer. To which we thought, what? We don't have a silverware drawer? And so we go in our kitchen, and our kitchen is like L-shaped like this, and the dinner table goes in the middle. And all of a sudden, I look at all the drawers, and I realize the house that we just moved into, the widest drawer is about this big. And we have all of these really small drawers. And so our old silverware holder that we had from our apartment, it wasn't going to work out. And so what we did is we went and got this thing, and we put it on our dinner table, and we put all of our silverware, and it's really sanitary, right? Especially considering 2020, all the silverware just sticks right out of it. We put it on our dinner table, and this is how we approach silverware for the entirety of living in that house. Well, we just moved into our second house about a couple months ago now, and about 2 weeks ago, we had friends over. And when we moved into this house, let me caveat with this, we were so excited about the silverware drawer that we were going to get, because literally, I think our realtor thought we were crazy, because we're going in and he's like, check this out and check this out, and we're in the kitchen opening up drawers oh my gosh, look at all the silverware possibilities. We were so excited. But then we have friends over. And about 2 weeks ago, we're about to eat dinner, and they're like, hey, they're opening up drawers going, where do you want, where's your silverware at? And then I realized as I went into the pantry, I grabbed this thing with all the silverware in it, and it's at the top shelf because Ashley likes to play tricks on me and put it places I can't reach it. And it's up there, and I grab it, and I come out and I say, here's our silverware, and I put it on the table. And I had a moment of realization that we were so excited about the new silverware possibilities, our new life ahead of us, and yet we had so easily just defaulted into what we knew and our old habits and what we had just been operating as in our first house. The reason I shared that with you is because I think when it comes to how we approach rules around Christianity, that we have a tendency to do the same thing. Perhaps you were raised in a really traditional household, a really strict household, and maybe it was rules, and so because of that way of thinking, you've always just said, I don't want anything to do with that. Or like I said a second ago, perhaps you're a Jesus follower, and you've had this thing in your life, this one particular rule that pops up time and time and time again, and you just can't seem to get a hold of it, and you just don't know what to do about it. And it just keeps popping up, and you struggle to reconcile those two things. I think we all do this, and when we do this, the way that we are looking at Jesus is really through the lens of a rules-based faith. A rules-based faith, and here's what I mean by that. Rules-based faith is approaching God this way. It's saying, hey God, when I follow the rules really well, man, you love me so much. You are so happy with me. Or it's, God, man, dang it, I messed up again. I am so sorry. God, please forgive me one day. Oh my gosh, I just keep messing up. God, you must be so upset with me. Or it's projecting onto other people how you view rules when it comes to God. And it's saying, oh man, look at those people. They're just knocking it out of the park. They're doing so good. Man, one day God's going to love me as much as he loves them, I bet. Or perhaps, we're really good at rule following. And we think to ourselves, man, look at those people over there. I'm so glad I'm not as bad as them. If we're honest, maybe we have thoughts. We get excited when other people fail sometimes. See, this is approaching God through a rules-based faith. In fact, I want to camp here for a second because I want to read a list of things, and these are indicators. And I just want you to tally in your mind how many of these you would check off and say, yeah, that's how I approach God. And I just want you to tally in your mind. And these are indicators that you might be viewing God through a rules-based faith. Here's the first one. You've always avoided Christianity because you feel like you'd have to change your behavior in order to become a Christian. Your status with God is based on your performance in some aspect of life. You feel bad about yourself and like God is mad at you when you don't come to church. Reading your Bible and spending time with God just feels like a chore. You give money to church not because you get to, but because you have to. You beat yourself up constantly because of a sin that you can't seem to get a hold of in your life. You don't spend a lot of time with people who believe something different than you. You judge other people who aren't as good as you. You're exhausted and worn out and tired in faith and life. You never feel like you're enough. Or perhaps as I read these, you felt bad about yourself. And then you felt bad about the fact that you felt bad about yourself as I read those. Those might be indicators that perhaps you're viewing God and Jesus through a rules-based faith. Now, there are two things I want you to know if that's you. And the first is this, is that you are not alone. It is so common for us to get all caught up in the rules and struggle to reconcile. How do these things fit together? You're not alone. It's something I've struggled with time and time again. But the second thing I want you to know is that there is something better than rules-based faith. There is a better way to approach God, a better way to view the person of Jesus. And it's called grace-based faith. Grace-based faith. And grace, Buck talked about last week, you got to go back and listen to it. Grace is the unmerited, unwarranted favor of God in our life. Grace is unearned. Grace is something that we cannot do to get. It is freely given to us. And when we view God through a grace-based faith, we are freed up to experience the grace of God in our life in a way like we never have before. But not only that, we stop seeing God through the rules in our life and we truly understand the rich, meaningful relationship with God that we can have. That's what happens when we view God through grace-based faith. You see, one day, really a lot of days, I went to UT and I walked by this tower all the time. This tower right here. See, this tower, UT Tower, many of you guys are familiar with it. And the reason I walked by it every single day is because I walked from my dorms to the communication school. If you've ever been on the upper deck of I-35 and you've looked over towards campus, you've seen the tower, but you've also seen what looks like a prison. And that was my dorm room the first year of college. And so it was Jester. I walked from Jester all the way to the communication school. And I would read these words on this picture. You can't really see them, but they're right here. They're on top of the library of the school. And the tower is a part of the library. But here's what the words say, and I want to see if you can finish the sentence. And if you're watching at home, try to finish the sentence as well. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Yeah, we were a little out of pace there, but that's okay. The truth shall set you free. What's crazy about it is tens of thousands of students walk by these words every single day. The words of Jesus written on a building, on a tower, whose slogan is what starts here changes the world. I think that there is merit to these words. I think that there are truths that set us free to experience better in life. And I think there is a specific truth that we can all hone in on and that we can all look at today that allows us to stop approaching God through rules-based faith and frees us to see him through grace-based faith instead. Not only this, I think it's a truth that allows us to see Jesus as nothing else than just him and who he is and what he came to do for us. See, Jesus has this kind of paradoxical way of explaining this as he's up on a hill one day doing a famous sermon called Sermon on the Mount. He's up on a hill, and he begins to unpack this truth in this way. Here's what he says. He says, "Don't misunderstand why I have come. I did not come to abolish the law of Moses or the writings of the prophets. No, I came to accomplish their purpose." Now, don't forget, there is a diverse set of rule followers here in the crowd. There are the sinners, the prostitutes, the tax collectors, the people who are not very good at following the rules, and then there are the best of the best, the Pharisees, the religious leaders. And Jesus is saying, hey, I want to clear this up for you. Don't misunderstand me. Here's why I've come. I didn't come to get rid of that. No, I came to accomplish the original intent. And everybody in the crowd is familiar with the Jewish law. The Jewish law was given by God in the Old Testament, part of the Old Covenant, and there was this system in place where if you break the rules, then there's this whole animal sacrifice system to atone for the sins because God, by definition, has to be just. And this was the system that they are all familiar with. And Jesus is saying, hey, the rules, the laws are not going away, but I have come to introduce something new, the original purpose to accomplish their purpose. He expands on this point. He says, I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not even the smallest detail of God's law will disappear until its purpose is achieved. He's saying, don't get me wrong, don't ignore the rules, but there is a purpose. There is something bigger at play here. But I warn you, unless your righteousness, unless your rule following is better than the righteousness of the teachers of the religious law and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. See, now the Pharisees hear this, and they're going, oh, yeah, that's right. We are as good as it gets. But then everybody else in the crowd is hearing this, and they're going, oh no, how am I ever going to measure up? But you see, Jesus knew this was going to be their response, and he continues, and he goes further when they don't expect him to, and he begins to unpack this truth that we're talking about today, and he begins to unpack what he meant when he said, complete the law, bring it to fruition. Here's what he says. He says, you have heard it, that our ancestors were told, you must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment. All of them listening are thinking to themselves, yeah, we've heard this before, and we're familiar with this. But I say, if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you even get mad, if you just call somebody an idiot out of anger, you are subject to judgment. It is the same as if you have committed murder at that point. If you're in traffic and you're stuck on Mopac and you say a choice word about a choice vehicle in front of you, whatever it might be, it is as if you have already committed murder. They're going, whoa, Jesus, what? We're not familiar with this one. And then he goes on, he gives them another example. He says, you have heard the commandment that says, you must not commit adultery. Yeah, they've all heard this. But I say, again, this is the completion of the law, but I say, anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. They're going, oh no, Jesus knows. Don't even look at that. Don't even watch it. It is as if you have already committed adultery. And they're going, Jesus, whoa, you're taking this a little too far. You're taking this is further than I thought. Even the Pharisees are starting to get a little uncomfortable with this one. And then Jesus gives another example after another example after another example, and we read the entire thing, and you see he says, you have heard it said, but I say. You have heard it said, but I say. And with every single one, he raises the bar. He raises the bar in terms of how good they needed to be to reach the standard that he was talking about. Until finally he wraps it up, and he says, but you are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. And the crowd is just quiet. And I would imagine they're just frozen. They don't even know what to think at this point. Jesus is illustrating two big things there, and there are things that they wouldn't understand because this was towards the beginning of his ministry. There were things they wouldn't understand until later on, but there's two things we pull from the story right here. And the first is this, is that God looks more at our hearts than the act itself. Jesus was concerned about people's heart, not necessarily the rule following itself. And here's why, it's because Jesus knew that with the Pharisees in the crowd, and he knows what's true of all of us today, is that sometimes we do the right things for the wrong reasons. Sometimes we do the right things because it makes us feel good. Sometimes we do the right things because it gives us control in our life, and without control in our life, we just feel like it is chaotic all the time. Sometimes we do the right things because it makes us feel better about the people around us, and it gives us power over them emotionally. Jesus knew this. Not only that, but Jesus also knew that as he was raising the bar, he had something else that he was trying to communicate. You see, because I think everybody in the crowd 2,000 years ago has the same thought that we have as we read this story. And that is that we go, Jesus, but nobody can be that good. Jesus, nobody can be that good. And I think, and this is just my opinion, so take it that way, but I think that if Jesus were here today, his response would be, Exactly. Exactly. But Jesus, I'm never going to be able. Exactly. But Jesus, that's too high of a standard. Exactly. But Jesus, I don't know how I can. Exactly. You see, Jesus is pointing us towards this humbling, sobering, gut check kind of truth. And the truth is this right here, is that we'll never measure up on our own. We'll never measure up on our own. That's the point Jesus was making. That is and was the truth that he was trying to get across. Now you might be thinking, Jeremy, you said that there was going to be a truth and it was going to set us free. That's not very freeing. That's just kind of mean. And if that's your response, I get that, but I want to push back on you a little bit because I firmly believe that when we come to the end of ourselves and we recognize that on our own we will never measure up, we see Jesus more clearly than we ever have in our entire life. When we understand the reason he died for us, that he lived a perfect life that we could never live, he died a death he did not deserve, and he rose 3 days later to prove that he was who he claimed to be. When we fully get that because we understand we could never do it on our own, we see grace, and we are allowing God to approach us with the grace that he has for us, and we stop trying to approach him through the rules that we just can't seem to ever get right. This is grace-based faith. We begin to understand that we aren't called to follow a set of rules. That's how we approach God so often. We are called to follow a person, the person of Jesus. Now, the rules are important, don't get me wrong, but they are not the purpose in which Jesus came. I love how Judah Smith unpacks kind of this question that we all wrestle with because we continue to approach God through rules over and over and over again. And Judah Smith, a pastor, says this. He says, why do we insist on paying for what Jesus already purchased? I love that. Why do we insist on paying, on approaching God for something that Jesus already purchased? It's done. It is finished. Did you know that when you place your faith and trust in Christ, at that moment, you will never be any more or any less righteous than you are right then and there? That's how God views you. It is done. It is finished in that moment right there. Which means that Jesus is not a means to an end. He isn't this thing over here that we just think about as we try to get the rules right. No. Jesus is the end. Jesus is the end. He is the point. He is the focal point of faith. Which means if we're beating ourselves up about something that we can't get right in our life and we think that God thinks about that about us as well, we're just projecting onto God what we think he thinks because we don't like ourselves. We are missing the focal point of faith. We are missing the person of Jesus. It means that if we feel uninspired and we feel like we're just checking the boxes all the time, perhaps we're missing the point of Jesus, the focal point of our faith. If you've never thought Christianity to be attractive or appealing, then I would challenge you and push back and say, perhaps you've never looked honestly and objectively at the person of Jesus Christ. Because when you look at the person of Jesus Christ and you desire things in your life like justice in our world today, you desire love, you desire grace, you desire peace, you desire true happiness and joy and contentment, I don't think there's any place else that you will find that more consistently and concretely than the person of Jesus Christ. I think you got to give him a true, honest perspective, clear up the lens, clear up the rules, and look at the person of Jesus Christ because he is the point. If you were to come to me and we were having coffee, and you were to say, okay, Jeremy, I want to stop approaching God through the rules. I want to make Jesus the point of my faith again. I feel like I've gotten off track, or I feel like I've never done that before. What does that actually mean? See, the paradox is that we want to go, what do we do? When it's not about what we do, it's about what's been done for us, but we still have that question. So, okay, what do we do? And if we're having coffee, I'd probably pull out my phone and I would go to the Bible app and I would open John 15 and say, you know what? I'm really trying to figure this out every single day of my life. And I feel like I've got decades of trying to discover what it means to keep Jesus at the center of my faith, but this is the best answer that I have found. And it's the words of Jesus as he explains what it means to keep him at the center of our lives. Here's what he says to his disciples. He says, I am the vine and you are the branches. I'm the vine. I am like the trunk of a tree. I am the center. I'm the foundation, and you are just a branch. You are an extension of me. And he goes on. He says, those who remain in me or abide in me, and I in them will produce much fruit. Those who remain in me, those who stay connected, those who keep in step, those who are with me constantly, I will produce much fruit. What do you mean by fruit? Well, there's this kind of metaphor used throughout the New Testament, and it's about God producing fruit in our lives. And Paul, one of the apostles, he talks about the fruits of the Spirit, or the fruits of walking with Jesus, and he said that the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. These are the fruits of the Spirit, and when we have these things in our life, we become the men, the women, the leaders, the mothers, the fathers that we ultimately want to be. See, Jesus is saying, if you stay connected with me, I produce those things in your life. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Apart from me, you can do nothing. In the same way that a branch cannot produce fruit on its own, it's like we're trying to be branches and we're going, fruit! And it just doesn't work like that. That's not what happens. A branch cannot produce fruit without the vine, and Jesus says, apart from me, you cannot do it either. You can do nothing. And we know this to be true. We might push back, but we know that we all fall short. But Jesus says, if you remain in me, and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want, and it will be granted. It's like so often we approach God, but Jesus is saying it's backwards, but we approach God and say, God, I'm going to be as good as I can, and then you and I are going to be good. And Jesus is saying, no, you've got it backwards. Switch it around. Recognize you and Jesus are already good, and then watch the good that he does in your life if you stay connected with him. It's paradoxical, but this is what Jesus is pointing towards. If you stay connected with him, watch what he does in your marriage. Watch what he does in your finances, in your health. Watch what he does in your relationships, in your parenting. Watch what he does in your faith day after day after day if you stay connected with him. See, rules-based faith is all about doing everything I can to get to God. Grace-based faith is about being, recognizing you are already there. It's waking up each day and going, Jesus, apart from you, I can do nothing. Again, if we were sitting having coffee, I would just say, hey, I've taken this right from Jesus. This is something I say every morning. I wake up and go, Jesus, you know what? Apart from you, I'm going to mess things up. Apart from you, I'm not going to get it right. Jesus, apart from you, I don't know what's going to happen in my life, but I know it's not going to be good because you are good and I fall short. But Jesus, would you come produce fruit in my life today? Would you just simply let me walk with you? I know I'm concerned and worried about this. Just let me walk with you each moment of my life. Let me stay connected with you. And then you watch what he does in your life as a result. I'm not a big sports guy, and the reason I know this is because there are people in our office who walk by me, and they don't say anything else, but they give me a high five and they yell sports, and then they walk further on. That's how I know I'm not a sports guy. But I'm going to try a sports analogy here, so just bear with me a little bit. You see, I think that so often when we have a problem in our life or something that we're trying to get a hold of or some habit we're trying to stop, some habit we're trying to start, I think too often we play defense with those kind of things. And playing defense, I mean, you can score some points, but defense by itself does not win any games. But we play defense, we're like, you know what? I'm going to read all the books I can about this thing. I'm going to set all the goals. You know what? I failed yesterday, but I'm going to try harder this time. I'm going to white knuckle my way. I'm just going to put up these barriers, and you know what? I can just do it this time. And you see, abiding in Jesus is like getting on offense against the problems of your life. Abiding in Jesus is like waking up each day and going, okay, I got these defense things I'm playing, but Jesus, we got to score some points today. So can I stay connected with you? And can I just walk with you today? And would you allow me to produce the good fruit in my life? And that's how you win games, and that's how you win life. So often we think that Jesus is a magic pill. You might be thinking, really, Jeremy, that was the whole point of this message. Jesus, you started that way and you ended that way. But really, Jesus is not a magic pill. He's not going to fix everything overnight. It is over time. Why? Because Jesus is a person to follow. And it's day after day after day after day waking up and going, God, I'm going to mess it up on my own. Would you come be with me today? I like how Judah Smith, again, kind of captures this idea. He says this. He says, grace, on the other hand, is internal. It works on a heart level. Remember, God is concerned about our hearts. Where rules attempts to force us to do the opposite of what we want, grace actually changes what we want. It's like an inside-out approach. It's I'm going to be with Jesus, I'm going to recognize he's good, and then I'm going to watch the good that he does as he changes my heart. He goes on. He says it creates internal consistency and integrity. Doing what is right becomes much easier. If you do nothing else this year, I would plead with you and ask you and challenge you, don't just follow the rules. The rules are there for a reason, but they are not the purpose. Faith is bigger than that. Jesus is the focal point of the faith. Follow Jesus first and foremost. And my honest hope and my prayer, what I've experienced in my life, and I've seen it in so many others, is that as you follow these rules and you kind of lose sight, but you begin to follow Jesus, the rules kind of just take care of themselves. That you look back a year, you look back 5 years, you look back 10 years, and all of a sudden you go, oh my gosh, Jesus, look what you did in my life. I know I can't take credit for that because I would mess it up on my own, but Jesus, wow, thank you. Look what you did in my life. It's incredible. And so if you're here, I want to give you the opportunity. I want to give you the opportunity to perhaps reorient yourself around the person of Jesus. If you feel like you've lost sight, perhaps you have kind of gotten away and you've gotten caught up in the rules, I want to give you an opportunity to reorient yourself on the person of Jesus. Or if you're here and you've never taken a step to follow Jesus, I just want you to know you can take a step to follow him before you ever change your behavior, before you ever follow any set of rules. Perhaps today is just taking a baby step and going, I want to look honestly at the person of Jesus. To wrap up our time, the band is going to sing a song. And it's just something I want to be sung over you. I just want you to read the lyrics and process this as you think about your life and your faith. But one of my favorite lyrics in this song is, God, I'm sorry when I've come with my agenda. I'm sorry when I forgot that you're enough, like we so often do. Jesus, open up my heart to you. Take me back to where we started. I hope that as they sing this, that perhaps you have an opportunity to reorient yourself around Jesus and that he would come to life for you in a way that he never has before.